Good afternoon, and welcome to SPINS's webinar on the plant-based boom. We will explore what exactly is plant-based, which categories are growing the fastest, hot innovation worth checking out, and how you, the retailer, can get your fair share of this sales growth. But first, I'd like to start by introducing our panel. Hi, I'm Kelsey Bright, and I'm an account executive with SPINS. My role is to connect with retailers across the country to explore how SPINS can support your merchandising strategies to drive growth. I'm joined today by Jeff Crumpton and Casey Farrell. Jeff is SPINS's Manager of Retail Reporting Solutions and is responsible for developing products and solutions to support our retail partners. Casey is the Senior Data Product Manager on SPINS's Product Intelligence team. As part of that team, she leverages her background in food access and nutrition programming to produce insights on nutrition trends and wellness solutions to support our retailers' analytics strategies. We're looking forward to exploring this topic with you all. In case you're not familiar with SPINS, we are a wellness-focused data company who seeks to power the retail ecosystem with a common language to power growth. We partner with retailers, brands, and distributors to provide insight into market sales performance and greater nuance into the attributes and product qualities driving sales. You all know best how rapidly things are changing in today's retail landscape. New products hit the market faster and more frequently. The way shoppers shop has evolved and has only been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's an increasingly challenging environment for independent retailers to stay competitive. SPINS is on a mission to support you in this changing landscape to ensure you have the most productive, innovative, and differentiated assortment possible to stay ahead and to continue evolving in this marketplace. When it comes to trends and innovation, SPINS is able to identify these insights quickly due to our full channel visibility. This means that our data represents the full retail landscape. That's our proprietary channels, which include specialty natural enhanced, regional and independent grocery and pet channels, and our conventional channels via our partnership with IRI. Innovation and trends most often begin their life cycles in our proprietary channels as emerging brands get their start in these retailers and progressive shoppers frequent these locations. Because of this visibility across the marketplace, SPINS is able to support you, the retailer, with these insights early so that you can be first to street in your market with new items and fast-growing trends. Within these channels of sales data, we're able to segment product performance and pinpoint trends driving growth through our extensive product attribution. These attributes include things like category and brand, but also many health and wellness attributes like health focuses, functional ingredients, and label claims like plant-based. For you as the retailer, these product attributes also allow you to benchmark your own sales more effectively and also to more easily identify opportunities within the market. Of course, plant-based is the attribute or dietary trend we'll be focusing on today. As I mentioned at the top, we'll be taking a deep dive so that you not only understand what is plant-based, but also how to activate against it. We'll start by discussing the evolution and emergence of this trend and how SPINS analyzes it. We'll then go into the specific sales trends we're seeing in the marketplace so that you know how to activate against them. Then we'll close with pricing and promotion and the innovation strategies to consider to best meet your plant-based shoppers' needs. We will have time for questions at the end, so feel free to ask them in the chat and we'll be sure to answer them before we wrap up. With that, I will pass things over to Casey.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. So I wanted to start today by talking about where plant-based came from, the evolution and the emergence of the term and the diet. So when talking about a plant-based diet or product, it's important to understand where the term came from and how it has become so popular in recent history. Originally, when people chose not to eat meat or other animal products, they followed a vegan or vegetarian diet. Over time, though, these diets became more about restriction and what a product is not. It also became a symbol of a greater movement against the animal-based marketplace as a whole. It became strict, nuanced, difficult to adhere to, and left many who sympathized with the movement feeling as if it was an unattainable standard. In a sense, they had no dietary home. So consumers don't want to be restricted or feel like they have to abide by certain rules. They want the flexibility to customize their diet based on their health and their needs, as well as to meet their budget and their preferences. So that's really where plant-based began. Plant-based emerged via personalization and the ability to swing the dietary pendulum back toward plants, especially nutritious plants, while still allowing for those aforementioned freedoms. Plant-based foods are more about what a product is, and a plant-based diet allows the option to eat some meat or some animal products so consumers don't feel stuck without any freedom to choose. This way of eating allows people the ability to feel like they're making a step toward improving their health or helping the environment without taking a stance against an industry as a whole. Next slide. So once plant-based foods came onto the market, people began to seek them out for a few different reasons, one of which being because of the nutritional benefit. In fact, more than 70% of people view protein from plant sources as healthy, whereas only 40% view protein from animal sources as healthy. There are a few key differences, though, to call out when looking at plant-based foods versus those from an animal. Plant-based foods can be lower in saturated fat than animal-based foods, and foods from plants are typically higher in fiber and unsaturated fats. These characteristics are both things that are considered healthy options for the general population, but are also really standard characteristics of a heart-healthy diet. Plant-based products, however, may not contain all of the essential nutrients found in their animal counterparts. So, for example, alternative milks do not have as much calcium or vitamin D as dairy milk. And particularly for people who are lactose intolerant and can't consume dairy, they're particularly interested in purchasing a product that offers the same benefits as drinking dairy milk. So because of this, brands are fortifying their products in order to measure up nutritionally so that when a person chooses a plant-based product, they're not sacrificing anything nutritionally. In addition to fortification to mimic their animal counterpart, in order to compete in the flexitarian space, plant-based products are supplementing with added beneficial ingredients and nutrients to surpass animal-based items. Brands are adding superfoods or more protein sources, so they not only match up, but go above and beyond in terms of the nutritional profile. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on too with some examples. Next slide, please. So to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the plant-based segment, SPINS offers 3 solutions to dive deeper into product categorization and positioning with our specialty hierarchy structure and our shopper-centric attribution. SPINS offers exclusive plant-based categories and subcategories within our hierarchy to provide retailers an easy way to quickly identify core segments of the plant-based market. We have 4 categories and 41 subcategories to narrow in on specific subsets of the market that are alternatives to traditional products like cheese, meat, poultry, and milk, which are divided by storage type, as well as in quickly growing subcategories like ice cream and yogurt. This granular segmentation provides unparalleled insights into an ever-changing and evolving market. SPINS also offers 2 attributes to further identify different types of plant-based products. The diet attributes we have leverage the nutrition fact panel and ingredient statements to tell us what products are compatible or friendly to a particular diet or way of eating. These diet attributes are ideal for retail solutions such as e-commerce, product filters, shelf tags, and product assortment management. But care should be taken when leveraging these attributes for sales trends. So this is because these attributes capture all products that qualify for the particular diet, not just those products that are labeled or positioned for that diet. The amount of products that qualify for a diet typically far exceeds the amount of products that are labeled or positioned for a particular diet. Also, many products inherently qualify for a particular diet, like all olive oils, for example, qualifying for keto. The plant-based diet here attribute evaluates the ingredient string of a product and identifies any type of animal-derived ingredient within the product. It's specifically designed to help shoppers adhere to a more rigorous form of plant-based eating across the entire store. On the other hand, the intent of positioning attributes is to capture the marketing position of a product by blending fact-based label information with marketing claims. So these attributes are used to identify the target audience of a brand or product by identifying the age, gender, health focus, and persona that the product is marketed toward. The plant-based positioning attribute identifies products within key categories that are direct alternatives of meat-based categories like meat and milk alternatives. These products may still contain certain ingredients that are animal-derived, such as a product that's a meat-free nugget may have egg whites in it, or a veggie burger that does have dairy cheese in it. These products are positioned as plant-based alternatives to meat, are found in our plant-based subcategories, and are an important element when considering the entire spectrum of the various forms of plant-based eating. These two attributes on top of our differentiated hierarchy illuminate opportunities into a highly innovative and dynamic marketplace while staying relevant with shoppers. So in the next section, my colleague Jeff Crumpton, who's the manager of Retail Reporting Solutions, is going to show you how you can use our categorization and attribution to illuminate and delve deeper into plant-based sales trends.
Casey, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. The first thing I want to cover off is data source and methodology. Where are we getting our data? So you'll see very top, we have some point of sale data, our proprietary channels, the natural and enhanced channel. You'll see that partnership that we have with IRI that brings in the conventional view into the picture here. And then you'll see that we have some weekly data that we're using internally to be able to get out ahead of some of the trends. Product attribution is very important, particularly in plant-based. So you'll see where we lean on that quite a bit. You'll see that focus on SPIN's NPI, the natural product industry. And then of course, we'll pull in some panel data so that we can understand what the shoppers are doing. Next slide, please. Through our work with IRI as our partner on through their household panel data and loyalty data, we learned some very interesting facts about plant-based consumers and the behavior during this pandemic. In particular, we decided to look at refrigerated plant-based meat alternatives. 32% of households purchased in the last 8 weeks through 4/19, and they were new to this category, meaning they hadn't made a purchase in the prior 52 weeks. New buyers contributed roughly $41 million to the category as households made an average of 2 trips during this 8-week period, spending on average $16.34 on products that were not part of their routine shop. Opportunity exists to convert these triers into loyal buyers. Next slide, please. In the next 4 weeks, ending on 5/17, 30% of new buyers returned to the store and purchased again, increasing their buy rate to 19.59 and still making that 2 trips within the 4-week period. More new meat substitute buyers purchased meat substitutes, the percentage of buyers at that 8 weeks, and there were some distinct differences between the existing and new buyers. Both had higher household incomes, with kids that over-index for African-American households, but the existing buyer are more likely to be Gen X with teenage children. The new buyers brought in since COVID-19 are slightly younger, smaller families that are also over-indexed for Asian and acculturated Hispanic families. The female head of these millennial households is more likely to work full-time in a white-collar position. Taking it one step further, we can see that the subset of these new buyers who have come back and repeated in May are more likely to be headed by a single parent with a high income, possibly looking for quick, healthy meal solutions for her family. Understand your shoppers and who is buying, and you can add significant sales and profit dollars to your bottom line. And this category has no signs of slowing down. Next slide, please. So if we look at first food and bev at the very top, we're looking at a 4-week trend and we're looking at a 52-week trend. You'll see that on average, 15% growth at 4 weeks, doing much better than the longer trend there. And then putting that NPI lens on it, you see that the growth rate ticks up a little bit from total food and bev. However, when we look at the 4 weeks for the plant-based growth, it is almost twice what we're seeing elsewhere. And that's phenomenal. Next slide, please. So if you recall earlier when Casey was talking about the difference between the diet plant-based and the plant-based position diets, what we're doing here is doing a little bit of a dive on what a category level looks like. So you'll see that we have 4-week dollars. You'll see what those categories are, what the total dollars derived are, and you'll see some pretty phenomenal growth rates there, 77, 53, 43, and then typically, most of these are doing better in the recent weeks than they are in the longer trend. There are a couple. The first one, the refrigerated plant-based meat, you see that's growing at about 78%. It was growing still quite a bit over the course of the last 52 weeks, but there are others further down that you can see that growth rate is significantly higher. If we look at the plant-based positioned, These are those products that are positioned, with plant-based called out on the label. In many cases, you'll see phenomenal growth. For example, the shelf-stable tea and coffee RTD, 235%. Granted, it's a smaller base, but what this really outlines is there is opportunity in these categories when we think about plant-based positioned products. Next slide, please. Proteins, we're doing a dive on mainstream versus plant-based here. And everything that we see kind of center left are going to be those mainstream meat categories. So things like frozen and refrigerated deli meats, bacon, seafood, poultry cuts, things like that. And then we're looking on the right-hand side, center right. These are the plant-based alternatives. You'll see that we break those out into various categories as well. What I'll bring your attention to are the small bubbles that we see on the right-hand side. And we've moved that secondary index over because the growth rate was just so phenomenal. We couldn't get it on the slide without having to adjust that. So you can see that, the regular meat, because of COVID, still saw remarkable growth. They're definitely in the 20 to 30% range year over year. But when we're looking at something like the first one, plant-based burgers, it's somewhere about 100% versus just a year ago. Again, these are smaller volumes for sure, but what this tells me is that we see unprecedented growth within these particular subcategories, and the innovation within this space exists within plant-based. Next slide, please. So now if we take that a little step further and we look at, for example, on the left-hand side, we're looking at plant-based categories. Again, we're looking at that 4 and 52 weeks. And we look at the right-hand side, these are the mainstream category comparisons. You can see, for example, at the very top where the refrigerated plant-based meat, plant-based milks is doing quite well. Pretty much on par, shelf stable. A lot of this benefits from the fact that these probably have longer shelf life than regular refrigerated milk. You can see that 8% growing at 4 weeks, 6% at 52 weeks. So certainly COVID is playing a role in the plant-based milk category. But when you get into something like the frozen and refrigerated meat alternatives, you can really see where the refrigerated is taking off, almost 90% growth rate. That's still not as hot as it was at 52 weeks. So this is obviously has been on fire for a while. It doesn't show any signs of slowing down. But if we jump into something like yogurt and kefir is a great example. You can see the plant-based versions of yogurt and kefir is about 18%. And you can see that their mainstream analogs is about 3%. So really the innovation that we're seeing in plant-based is driving the yogurt category higher. Next slide, please. Now we're looking at kind of plant-based categories on the left-hand side, and we're looking at subcategories on the right-hand side. And this again just kind of highlights the fact that, refrigerated plant-based meat, milk, the largest of the categories within this segment, is still growing at about 20-some%. But you can see that there is phenomenal growth in the refrigerated meat alternatives, some of the yogurt and kefirs and some of the tofus. Cheese is another one that has, cheese alternatives has quite a bit of interest there as well. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that same for some of the plant-based subcategories. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides that we're going to look at really looks at pricing and promotion. Obviously something like this with a lot of consumers really are introduced to these categories through promotions. Pricing is important. So we were interested to kind of understand what kind of the base dollars, that would be the dark blue, and the incremental dollars, those dollars that are derived through promotional activity, how that affects the category long term. So you can see if we go all the way back to January, how that moves along, and you can see very clearly the week of 3/15 and 3/22, where we have the huge stockpiling. And then you can see that it actually is still higher than where we started in January. And this is plant-based milk to start us off, again, the largest of the categories. And then down below, you can see what that promotion looks like. Light green is current, the dark green is year ago promotional dollars, and you can see that year-over-year change. Not surprising, fairly heavily promoted all the way up until we get to the pandemic, that stockpiling event. You see it back off into negative territory. That's something we see quite a bit kind of across the board, but you do see that start to recover as we get closer to the end of June there. And then on the right-hand side, we're looking at base dollars, looking at that year-over-year trend. The idea here is that in many cases, you can see where the base price has ticked up a little bit. In the case of milks, it's been relatively stable. But what you can see is the dip in promotional activity in those last 4 or 5 weeks that we've looked at on the bottom chart. Next slide, please. Now we're going to look at meat alternative. We've talked about how hot this one is. This is specifically refrigerated. So you can see, as we're kind of moving along, where we've had increasing sales. It continues. Base sales, are continuing to climb. Interesting by looking at the bottom chart on the left, where you can see that promotions really bottomed out through April, starting to pick back up through May and into June. And you can see that reflected in the yellow at the very top, where we're starting to see some incremental dollars from the promotional effects. And then if you look at base dollars for these meat alternatives, you can see that these have been quite high. The base dollars versus year ago have been fairly consistent over the course of the year, but compared to last year, they are significantly higher. Most of these are double digits where they were last year. And at the very bottom, you'll see kind of the promotions, promotional ARP, how that kind of bounces around. A couple of peaks and valleys on that, but still you see that kind of going back up as we kind of move towards the end of June. And next slide, please. Finally, we're going to look at plant-based cheese alternatives. We think this goes really well with the meat alternatives. We're in the middle of summer. Folks, while they're not probably having the huge parties that they are, they're still grilling, they're still getting together with small groups. And of course, cheese, and that correlation between meats, burgers, and cheese obviously is a pretty direct one. You can see that cheese has done quite well too. You can see where the promotion has dipped, where it came really back in May, and it's kind of backed off a little bit in June. Probably makes sense that some of those promotions are probably coming off heading into the holiday. They want to take advantage of some of the popularity of it. And you can see that base ARP trend fairly stable between 3-4%, and then the ARPs down below. You can see that that's actually the promo ARP kind of up and down as well. So it's a little mixed on that one. Next slide, please. And then finally, after going through all of that, we want to kind of give you an idea of some of the functional ingredients that we're thinking about with these plant-based products. Soy has always kind of been the mainstay, and you see that there's double growth from year ago at 4 weeks, but you can see that there are several others: probiotics, pea proteins, plant proteins, some grain-based, some of the general plant-based. All of these are indicators of where you may see some innovation within that particular category, be it cheese, be it meat, be it yogurt. So these are functional ingredients, a really important one that we look at quite a bit to kind of understand some of the deeper dynamics going on. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn that back over to Casey.
Great, thank you. So speaking of innovation, I want to delve a bit more into what we're seeing in the plant-based space, because there's certainly no shortage right now. And as categories become saturated and new ingredients become mainstream, brands are continuing to look for innovative ways to elevate their products. The two driving factors behind why consumers are seeking a plant-based diet for either health or sustainability concerns are also what are motivating people away from the meat and dairy aisles. The traditional meat and dairy brands, therefore, are having to become creative and introduce plant-based product lines to compete. Smithfield started their Pure line, and then Laura's introduced a plant-based line as well as a way to break into the plant-based meat ground segment, while traditional yogurt brands like Activia, Siggy's, and Yoplait Oui are diversifying their portfolio with plant-based alternatives. Lifeway now offers a plant-based kefir alternative made from a pea protein solution, and Chobani entered the plant-based space with their oat milk and oat-based products as a way to offer flexitarian consumers options within their brand. These companies are seeing success because brand name familiarity increases the likelihood that someone who is venturing into the plant-based foods realm for the first time will be more likely to purchase the product if they see a trusted brand. Next slide, please. So as we talked about before, when looking at the nutrition profile of plant-based foods, they don't always measure up to their animal-based counterpart. So we're seeing categories continue to grow and evolve as brands differentiate themselves with their ingredient and nutrition makeup. Protein content is still consumers' top priority, and products are adding protein from plant-based sources like pea or brown rice to reach or exceed their animal-based alternative while limiting carbohydrate and added sugar content to appeal to the paleo or low-carb diet tribes. One of the pioneers in achieving nutritional parity was Ripple, who launched their pea protein plant-based milk with huge success. Their milk is higher in protein and lower in sugar than other alternative milks, and it's also fortified with calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin B12. Their initial success fueled other brands in plant-based milks and across plant-based categories to do the same. In the plant-based category, there's a prevalence of flexitarian purchases being made, so brands need to compete in the protein category as a whole, not necessarily just looking at the meat, plant-based meat spaces separately. So brands are having to pay special attention to what their products might contain or be missing to make the purchasing decision easier. Additionally, there's a battle going on two fronts with flexitarians as consumers are looking to make sustainable choices when they purchase meat. They're seeking out brands or products that are organic, grass-fed, and they focus on regenerative ag. And more flexitarian consumers are turning to plant-based to meet their sustainability concerns as well as their nutritional needs. There used to be a heavy reliance on sugars as something that many dairy alternatives depended on in the past. Sugar amount was virtually ignored or used to cover up off or in different flavors. So some brands relied heavily on their alternative aspect to provide a health halo around their product. But times have changed and they are competing in a stronger, more diverse market filled with innovation. On top of it, the flexitarian shopper will pick up that lower carb dairy-based product if it means sticking to their low carb or no sugar diet. As brands are reducing the sugar content, they're looking to formulate using alternative low-calorie sweeteners. The leaner, creamer, and well functional beverages use monk fruit as a lower calorie sugar alternative to appeal to the low carb and keto communities. And the lava dairy-free yogurt turns to a blend of erythritol and monk fruit to achieve its low carb sweetness while remaining an indulgent treat. Brands like Halo Top have also taken this approach and had a lot of success with positioning their products as lower calorie or lower sugar options of traditional treat or dessert categories. So other brands are trying to follow suit. So another brand that's sticking to more naturally perceived ingredients for sweetness and looking at focusing on the clean label aspect versus reducing the added sugar content is this Oh My Gelato. So they're calling out only 7 ingredients on their label. They're limiting the use of additives and artificial ingredients. Instead, they use cane sugar and fruit for added sweetness. Next slide, thanks. So speaking of clean label, one of the arguments against plant-based foods is that they are perceived to be more processed. So some products need to add a number of different ingredients to achieve the same texture and taste consumers may expect from an alternative. Brands are now looking to clean label and formula innovations that allow them to reduce the number of additives in their products or use more natural ingredients like nut butters, avocado, mushrooms, and oats to achieve the same purpose. Brands like Primal Kitchen, Elmhurst, Lava, and Daring are some of the leaders in this space. They're using real ingredients like herbs and spices rather than the ubiquitous term natural flavor, while eliminating added sugar, thickeners, gums, stabilizers, and synthetically produced preservatives. This attracts the natural shopper who's evolving the definition of clean label, and particularly in the plant-based space. Next slide. Innovation also includes expansion into new categories that have been traditionally dominated by animal products or haven't seen the introduction of many plant-based products to date. Pastas and baking mix brands like Ancient Harvest and Birch Blenders are getting a boost and setting themselves apart in categories hit hard by the low-carb trend by adding vegetables and plant-based protein sources to diversify their product lines. And adding nondescript vegetarian or vegetable ingredients like cauliflower or substituting vegetables has shifted consumer perception of plant-based and increased the options in this marketplace. And we've seen innovation in plant-based jerky with dried mushrooms and eggplant products, but Akua launched their kelp jerky, appealing to consumers looking for sustainable sourcing. Kelp is also considered a superfood, which has been a hotly sought after group of ingredients, particularly right now, especially as consumers are looking to support their immunity. The Karima smoothie incorporates superfoods into its product formulation as well, with each variety and flavor combination calling out different superfood functions that may attract a different consumer looking to customize their diet and address a specific concern. Next slide. And the fastest growing product in shelf-stable meat alternatives right now is tuna alternatives. With sustainability concerns in mind, people are turning to alternatives in every category, including seafood. Good Catch offers tuna alternative pouches and frozen items created from a patented plant protein blend of pea, soy, lentil, and bean. They only came out of the market a few years ago, but they've already received great feedback in the vegan and plant-based segments. And though still new, alternative seafood options are definitely something to keep your eye on in terms of innovation and growth in the plant-based segment. So now I'll turn it back over to Jeff, who's going to talk about retailer strategies.
Thank you, Casey. Next slide, please. So let's think about some insights to consider here. We think of kind of the 5 Ps as how you address, plant-based. First of all, place. Where are you putting those in store? There was a great article that came out recently about the Kroger example of placing those plant-based products next to the meat, mainstream meat analogs, and what a kind of tick in sales they saw from doing that. It's kind of logical that folks looking for burgers are looking for all their burgers together. So place is a really important thing. And then also those kind of cross-merchandising opportunities. Plant-based cheese could be another opportunity to increase sales, increase baskets, and also get a higher ring from some of those other plant-based categories in the segment. Promotions are obviously very important. A lot of times promotions are driving folks into trying the products for the first time, so they drive that trial and repeat. Promotional placement can also be really important when considering where to put those products. Larger packs, private label offerings also, particularly now with tightening wallets, are something that folks are really kind of looking at. So, taking in your promotional strategy to capture and retain customers within plant-based is really important. And the products themselves, Casey's done an amazing job kind of going through all of the kind of the relevant product intelligence around plant-based. It's really important to make sure that you have the right assortment, that you're keeping up with new items as they're coming in. We see that this is a really dynamic category, and this is something that to capture your fair share, you really need to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on. It also means that there are opportunities to think about private label or value size, or even value brands that exist within the assortment that you have. I don't think it can be overstated that the economic pressure that a lot of families are under right now is significant. They're still looking for plant-based, better for you products. They still want to keep to principles that they hold dear, but they're looking for retailers to be able to support them when making those decisions. And the other thing too is there's a lot of new kind of fresh offerings, with the refrigerated and frozen. There's a real difference between how you're kind of putting that product out. One may be something that consumers are stocking up and putting in their freezer for kind of a usual meal prep, but some of those the refrigerated options could be something that's more grab and go, that's kind of grill out ready type of thing. And having both of those and understanding what customers are purchasing, which really can ensure that you have the right assortment for your customers. We talked about price, but price is really important. Making sure that you're partnering with your brand partners to make sure that you have the right price, that you're competitive in your market is important. And the most important, I think, is the people that you have in your store, yourselves, your associates that interact with your customers. You need to be the resource. You need to educate yourself to know what the plant-based diets mean, why it's important, how someone who is vegan or flexitarian, how they're different, and how your assortment could be reactive to both of them. because being a trusted advocate only means that your customers are going to continue to come back to you every time because you're the innovator in this space. Next slide, please. So what are our overall insights from today? Obviously, plant-based has a ton of benefits. It's hot. It's something that retailers need to be aware of. If you're not in this space, or if you've only tepidly kind of stepped in, it needs to be something that you're really looking at. There is a solid growth trajectory. We saw growth occurring well before COVID. It hasn't stopped with COVID. Customers are still looking for plant-based. In many cases, plant-based could be a response to news that we hear out of other meat processing facilities, but it could just be diet as well. There's a lot of there's so much within the space, and having a solid plant-based strategy for your store is very important. And then finally, innovation. This is so dynamic of a segment right now. We think about milks, we think about refrigerated meat alternatives and cheese, but there's tons of innovation that are happening across center store and the perimeter. Baking, some of the egg substitutes. There's a ton of stuff, some of the seafood in the shelf stable that Casey mentioned. Innovation is important. Keeping your finger on what's going on just means that you're getting your fair share and your customers understand that you are the destination for plant-based when they're shopping. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kelsey.
Thank you. So that brings us to the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to share them in the Q&A chat, and we'll be sure to ask them. So to start us off, how about this one? For a retailer navigating this plant-based trend, which top 3 opportunities would you recommend activating against first?
I'll take this one. Really for me, it's milk is really the entry point. The plant-based milk is kind of tried and true, but there's still growth to be seen within this particular category, be it shelf stable or be it refrigerated. We think of soy, but I think that we've seen nut milks, we've seen oat milks. There is continual innovation within this space. And so I think that for retailers that don't have a solid plant-based, this is a really good category to start in. I think meat and cheese also, for those alternatives, are also really good ones. They're really timely for summer grilling. I think that as folks are quarantined, as people are socially distancing, they're still looking for ways to connect. And this is a great way to be able to do it while still maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Doesn't mean that you're going to do it every time, but it's a flexitarian sort of mindset on maybe it's a meatless Monday here, but there's a mix. And I think that those are really great entry points into the category to think about plant-based.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Okay. So with the popularity of keto and a lot of other meat-rich diets, how can plant-based products keep up? Do we think they'll continue to grow?
Yeah, definitely. I can speak to this. There are definitely some ingredients within the plant-based and keto diets that overlap that consumers and brands can take advantage of, including avocado oil, coconut oil. Those are both really going to be your higher fat plant-based ingredients that are going to help someone maintain a state of ketosis, as well as a lot of the nut butters, your high fat nuts, and nut-derived oils. Those are definitely going to be ingredients that not only are we seeing more positioned in both the plant-based and keto segments, but we're seeing them incorporated more into formulations. So even like wellness bars that have more nut butters in them, or getting that added fat boost from plant-based sources, are really helping consumers who are trying to achieve both of those diets for sure.
Awesome. I'll ask one that I have from talking with retailers day to day. I talk to a lot of conventionally leaning retailers as well as naturally leaning retailers, and it does seem like their plant-based strategies should be a little bit different. Can one of you speak to maybe how a conventional retailer should run with this versus a natural retailer?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. In my mind, a conventional retailer is, really kind of like the entry point for their customers into the segment. So I would expect conventional retailers, if they don't really have a big presence within plant-based, to kind of go after the kind of the largest categories to make sure that they've got the right assortment. The brands that they would see, you know, just the assortment that they have, to me, gives the ability for a retailer to kind of understand that there's legs behind this where they may have some doubt. And from a conventional retailer, this is a great way to kind of test the waters to understand, you know, is this something that I'm going to see? If I bring in some plant-based burgers, some plant-based cheese, do I really see kind of the tick up that I'm seeing or hearing elsewhere in the industry? I think that is completely different than how a natural retailer would think about it. A natural retailer is already executing on those particular categories. And so they really need to lean into all the other innovation that occurs. You know, natural retailers really do a great job of kind of fostering trends like this. Plant-based has been obviously on the radar for them for many, many years. And you see the type of products, you know, coming in like the shelf-stable seafood, meat alternatives. You know, that's a great example of where, you know, customers are coming maybe to a natural store that would expect to find something like that there. They kind of come in to kind of expecting to see some innovation. And so I think natural retailers have a great opportunity to kind of think about, you know, being kind of foundational to helping brands like that. And I think also providing those kind of interesting, unique things to customers. And I think the two, conventional and natural, kind of work in tandem. You know, there are certainly opportunities where we see products from natural that move into the conventional space. And I think a lot of times people kind of look to what's happening in natural to kind of inform what they should do.
Great, great. Well, that brings us to the end here today. Thank you, first of all, to Jeff and Casey for sharing with us today. And thank you to all of you for your time and attention. We hope you found this webinar helpful and feel empowered to enhance your plant-based merchandising strategies as a result. If you already work with SPINS and you have further questions that come up, please reach out to your account manager or email our customer success team. And if you do not yet work with SPINS but would like to learn more about getting started, you can email our retail team at retailservices@spins.com. Thank you again and have a great day.